Почитувани представници на медиумите, почитувани граѓани.
Distinguished representatives of the media, members of the press, distinguished guests, good afternoon and welcome at today's press conference that will serve to promote the new credit line for digitalization and digital transformation of the companies. On this occasion, we will hear the statements of the President of the Government of the Republic of North Macedonia, Kovacevski, the Ambassador of Switzerland, Veronika Ullmann-Martin, and the Director of the Development Bank, Mr. Kira Naumov. In the very beginning, I would like to invite the President of the Government. You may take the floor.
Добар ден на сите, благодарам.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the presence at today's press conference. Dear Ambassador of Switzerland, Your Excellency Veronika Ullmann-Martin, dear Director of the Development Bank, Kira Naumov, dear attendees, dear citizens and members of the press. In the world, the focus on digitalization has never been greater and the development of new digital technologies has never been faster. Both companies and the public sector actively invest in digitalization and automation of the processes, all with the aim of increasing their efficiency, increasing the availability of products to consumers and services to end users. Digitalization of processes becomes a tool that achieves transparency, access to direct information, and the possibility of faster and more efficient business development. The degree of digitalization and economic development are directly related. They not only open doors to new opportunities for companies, but also make them more competitive and adapt to new generations of consumers and, of course, open new opportunities for employment of new generations of students from our universities. The government is doing everything for North Macedonia to move forward, to have strong economic growth and development, and that's why we advocate and create opportunities for access to funds for investment in the implementation of digital strategies and plan, or simply digital transformation. Digitalization is the basis of future social development, and everywhere in Europe and the world it will play an even more important role. Therefore, our commitment is to provide support to all businesses, companies that have ambitions for growth and development through digital transformation and automation, thus contributing to our economy. Today, the Director of the Development Bank, Naumov, will present the latest credit line, which is to support companies that invest in digitalization and digital transformation. This credit line is a novelty on the market, adjusted according to the needs of the market, and will be in function of utilizing the benefits of the companies from the digitalization process. The Development Bank is a market pioneer in this process, and there is no doubt that commercial banks will also receive an intensive to participate, all with the aim of speeding up and strengthening the implementation cycle of the digital transformation of the companies. Our goal is to intensify the digitalization process as a modern approach to business development and implementation of the digitalization determination by connecting the academic community, the business sector, government institutions, and the civil sector for joint detection and action in these areas where the state has the greatest potential and sufficient resources to invest. North Macedonia secured the support for creation of the strategy from the World Bank, from GIZ, and the IME program. On this occasion, I would like to extend my special gratitude for the financial support from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, as well as for the personal efforts of the Ambassador of Switzerland, Veronika Ullmann-Martin, for successful implementation. The Development Bank is now included in the program, and other relevant domestic and international institutions will be included later. The Development Bank played a significant role during crisis that not only affected our country, but it caused collapses in numerous countries for numerous sectors, unpredictability in the economy, energy, and health systems in the entire world. By offering favorable loans with low interest rates for small and medium-sized companies, we have created an environment for improving domestic competitiveness, supporting exports and economic growth and development. I want to thank the Director of the Development Bank, Mr. Naumov, and all his colleagues who in the past 3 years worked tirelessly together with the Ministry of Finance to secure the funds and to implement these credit lines with exceptionally low interest rates for the small and medium-sized companies. With the beginning of the energy and economic crisis, the Development Bank, with the support of the government, introduced 2 interest-free credit lines in the amount of 15.5 million euros and a credit line for energy efficiency and renewable energy sources through participating banks in the amount of 10 million euros with interest up to 1.6%. Then we made it possible to facilitate lending conditions on the credit line for production, processing and export of agricultural products in the amount of 7 million euros with 1% interest, as well as subsidizing the interest on loans given by commercial banks to companies that reinvested the profit in the amount of 2 million euros. The Development Bank also took an active participation in implementing the anti-crisis measures adopted by the government. The economy had credit lines from the European Investment Bank with favorable interest rates, out of which 41 million euros were placed by the EIB 6 program and the rest of the loans were placed from the revolving funds. With that, the Development Bank invested almost 300 million euros in support of the economy in 3 years to support 7,500 projects, of which funds in the amount of 107 million euros were invested in 2022 alone in favorable loans to support the liquidity of companies, investments in energy saving, and investments in renewable energy sources. 5 or 6 years ago, the Development Bank was said that it only exists. But now we can say that this bank, with the capitalization and the securing of investment funds from international creditors, it became a significant bank for support of the liquidity of numerous small and medium-sized companies. The economy had favorable loans of 41 million euros placed through the credit lines of the Development Bank. Thus, the Development Bank placed about 300 million euros. I want to repeat this because there are many questions. How many credit lines were placed by the bank? What type of credit lines? So I wanted to have this press conference so that we can see what was the role of the Development Bank of North Macedonia in the protection of the liquidity of these companies during these difficult health and then energy and economic crisis. Through the implementation of the credit line to support companies affected by the energy and price crisis at the beginning of 2023, the Development Bank, with the support of the government, which secured the funds due to the great interest, supported 262 companies with the amount of 7.3 million euros. The credit lines were adjusted in the direction of supporting the economy during the COVID crisis, when 4,134 companies were supported with an amount of 45 million euros. As a government, we have shown that we create and implement all our measures and programs in agreement, taking into account the remarks and suggestions of the business community, chambers of commerce and companies, all in order to provide them with quality growth and development. We will continue with an increased pace in the forthcoming period because these development loans with low interest rates were brought at the request of the companies. I'm here for additional questions, but after we hear the statements of the ambassador and the director of the bank. Now I would like to invite the ambassador of Switzerland, Veronique Ullmann-Martin. You may take the floor.
Your Excellency, President of the Government of North Macedonia, Mr. Kovacevski, dear Chief Executive Director of the National Development Bank of the Republic of North Macedonia, Mr. Naumov, dear representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen, in today's fast-changing world, digitalization is a prerequisite for the transformation of the society, for the growth of the economy, and for the prosperity of the country. New digital technologies and tools can have significant impact on promoting innovation, increasing efficiency, and can ultimately lead to better competitiveness of the private sector. However, for digitalization to bring expected results, it needs to be based on a solid needs and capacity analysis. Furthermore, investing in digital transformation requires significant financial and human resources in the short and long term. In terms of crises and shortages, private companies have to carefully assess their investment capacities and financing in digital transformation. And this transformation might not be a priority or simply may not be feasible because it's too expensive. This is why development institutions have to support the private sector to embark and invest in the digital transformation. Creating a tailor-made credit line for digitalization with favorable credit conditions can have a catalytic effect and contribute to significantly increase investment in this field. Recognizing the importance of having a well-designed credit line, Switzerland has been keen to support the National Development Bank of North Macedonia to conduct an analysis of the needs for financing digitalization of the private sector, reaching out to companies throughout the country. The Swiss experience shows that the active participation of the private sector in defining policies and measures that affect them is a prerequisite for creating an enabling environment for thriving economies. North Macedonia has a well-developed, vibrant, and competent ICT sector. However, most of the companies work for the international markets. I would like to encourage the domestic ICT sector to be more proactive in identifying products and services for the domestic industries. This cooperation can help to leverage each other's expertise and to overcome barriers to modernizations. The credit line that will be presented by the Director of the National Development Bank can also be an impetus for the ICT companies to use this opportunity to develop solutions, to test them on the domestic market, and potentially to reach new markets and new perspectives. Digital transformation may also bring challenges for some companies, which will have to acquire new skills, including digital skills and, of course, cybersecurity skills. In other words, investment in human capital will be critical in order to have the desired impact. Finally, I would like to congratulate the government of North Macedonia for approving the credit line that was developed by the National Development Bank. This credit line, hopefully, will contribute to create an enabling environment for the private sector development and for the innovation and the economic growth in this country. Thank you very much. Blagodaram faleminderit.
Thank you. Now we will continue and we'll hear from the Director of the Development Bank, Mr. Kira Naumov. You may take the floor. Distinguished Prime Minister Kovacevski, Your Excellency, Ambassador Ullman, distinguished members of the press, dear citizens, allow me to speak a bit technically for the line itself. The Development Bank of North Macedonia started an initiative for introducing a new credit line for digitalization and digital transformation in 2022. Following the needs of the companies and supported with the IME program and supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, and according to the analysis of the study, the bank, in its catalog of products, introduced a new credit line for digitalization and digital transformation. The credit line will be realized through qualified participating banks. It is created to enable the companies favorable loans in realization of the products in digital transformation. The realization of this credit line is mostly for own funds of the development bank, and if there is interest, then this will continue. Users of the loans from the credit line for digitalization and digital transformation through the participating banks can be micro, small and medium companies, and at this moment, before going to the tables and spreadsheets, the interest rate for the end users will be no higher than 2.9%. Now, we will look into the catalog of the new credit line. I will not look into them in too many details. You can find them on the website, or we can send them, and the banks and the clients already know about this, but these are some important things. We'll use our own funds, the amount of the loan according to the analysis. We said that we'll go with maximum 300,000 euros for capital assets and maximum 100,000 euros for working capital. It would be irrational to read the purpose. We mentioned the capital assets, the working capital, and the people from the IT sector will know how to manage and read this, but I believe that it is very acceptable because we did it with our friends from Switzerland. We included all types of assets and all types of required software solutions or capital assets that the companies mentioned in their polls. Time will tell, and maybe we can adjust this if a need arises. The loan period for capital assets up to 8 years with included grace period up to 12 months, and for working capital up to 5 years with included grace period up to 6 months. Very briefly, those who follow the credit lines can see that here for the working capital, this was usually 3 to 4 years, and now due to the specifics of this type of procurements, in working capital, we decided on 5 years. So the companies will not use the maximum, but we will leave the space of 5 years. The interest rate is up to 2.9%, and this means that the banks, the participating banks, can calculate 2.9% of interest rate, and based on their analysis, some of the companies can have even a lower interest rate, but not higher than 2.9%. We will use qualified participating banks, and this is something that is already known, something that we have in all our credit lines. Who are the users? Micro, small, and medium trade companies. They need to be registered in the Republic of North Macedonia. At least 51% of private ownership, settled liabilities towards the countries with a certificate from the Public Revenue Office. Of course, they should not be in the procedure of liquidity. They had the final statement for the last years. They had registered the true owner, and pursuant to the data in the registry of the National Bank, they should have statements and certificates not older than 3 months. A few more words. I would like to inform you that we will continue with the realization of the credit lines that were introduced as part of the set of measures by the government. The Prime Minister mentioned some of them. I would mention the credit line for energy efficiency and projects for sustainable energy efficiency and savings of energy, and the credit line for renewable energy sources through participating banks with an interest rate of up to, again, 2.9%. We had 10 millions completed, and we'll have 5 million more. The Development Bank, as until now, will continuously adjust its products in line of supporting the companies in the newly created conditions. And when speaking of newly created conditions, we speak about the micro level in the region, in the country, but also globally, because it reflects a lot on our country too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director. Now we'll have questions from the journalists. First, are there any questions on this topic? If not, then outside the topic. Boris?
Boris Poveli.
Boris? Prime Minister, precisely, we know about the freezing of the prices. What next product do you plan as a government to freeze? Who makes the PR for the freezing of the products? I think that in the past period, the first person of North Korea was taking photographs, but as we know, you're the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. What product will be freezed depends on the analysis made by the Ministry of Economy, and if there is a certain product that meets the criteria, then of course the government will make that decision, and if not, the government will not make a decision. I reckon that your conclusion that the president of a government goes to check the prices of the products. I think that this is a bad conclusion, and I will not respond to it, because if you were in North Korea, you would not have been able to ask questions. Just another question outside the topic. When making the deal with the neighboring Republic of Bulgaria, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government made agreements that the national television, the Macedonian radio television, will be broadcasted on Bulgarian territory, and the BRT, Bulgarian television, will be broadcasted here. Their program is being broadcasted in our country, and our program is not being broadcasted there. How far along is this process? We will contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and, of course, the Macedonian television that needs to be broadcasted will be, and as soon as I have an answer, then I will share it with you. Ognan? Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Having in mind that... Are there any questions about the gas? No? No. Constitutional changes. Is it okay? Having in mind that the process for gathering of this majority for constitutional changes started, you say that members of the opposition will vote on constitutional changes, and the opposition said that several members of your party will not vote in favor of the constitutional changes. Can you give us some specifics? Are you sure that all the members of the parliament from your party will vote? On how many votes do you count from the opposition? Are you close to those 80 members of the parliament? Thank you. I will not comment on the views of the opposition. You will ask them about this. In December, January and February, they said that they had 61 members of the parliament and that the reconstruction that I will submit will not go through. We all saw that it went through with an increased parliamentary majority. Now we have 65 members of the parliament. So what the opposition says is not realistic. This is the single answer. This is only an answer to the missed thesis they had, and they do not have what else to say. They say that they have some other members in the parliament. Regarding the constitutional changes, I will reiterate what I said so far. The constitutional changes are the obligation of each political party that is in favor of our country becoming a member of the EU. The amendments that are part of the negotiating framework and that are part of the decisions that need to be made with two-thirds majorities in the Assembly are only one of the decisions made with two-thirds majority. Until the membership in the EU, we have reforms in the judiciary, prosecution, public administration, decentralization, and these are all decisions that require two-thirds majorities. So this process cannot be a process of blackmails, of daily politics. On the contrary, it needs to be a process of wide consensus that will not be subject to daily press conferences. We had such examples in other countries, in Croatia, in Slovenia, for example. They also made difficult decisions when joining the European Union. But if you ask them, then they will tell you that these questions were not part of the daily political discussions led in their society, but on the contrary, it was something that the countries did and they became members of the EU. What is the benefit of the EU membership? You remember well where Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia were, even Bulgaria, when they were part of the Warsaw Treaty, and we were several times more developed countries compared to them due to the membership into the European Union, and only for this reason their standards grew. They have more companies. Each company registered in the EU is part of the market of 500 million buyers, and that is why these economies grew. And now our citizens who want to work in the European Union work in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and other countries. Our citizens deserve and want to work in the European Union, but here at home and not in a member state of the EU somewhere abroad. And that is why the decision and the decisions that will follow for membership into the EU need to be an obligation of each political party that is in favor of EU membership. There is no declarative support without realistic support. What we have with the opposition is only declarative support. Remember the NATO membership. They did not support a single decision for joining NATO. They did not support a single decision for EU membership. The most visible example is the voting of the Frontex agreement. The Frontex agreement is the first agreement where our language stands next to all languages of the European Union, signed by all EU member states and North Macedonia. They did not want to vote in favor of this so that they can ratify it in the Assembly. That's why they need to sit down, think, and to show their realistic support. I believe that our opposition has members of the parliament, political structures, and persons who want to see this country into the European Union. And another thing, when speaking of the opposition, a question needs to be asked: who has what kind of view? Because I see that the current president of VMRO DPMNE thinks one, and the former president thinks something totally else. So they should reconsider their views and positions. Can I on the same topic? Since you say that there are members of the parliament who would vote, will you have individual talks with these members of the parliament from VMRO DPMNE, or will you request a meeting with the leader of the party so that you can convince him and the whole group can vote? No, I will not have a leadership meeting, at least not convened by me, since in this moment there is no need of such thing. All members of the parliament will tell you that I do not have individual meetings. This refers to the members of the parliament from SDSM, but also to all other parliamentary groups, unless this is an issue when a member of the parliament speaks about certain legal amendments with the president of the government. But separate meetings, I never had the practice of holding such separate meetings, nor will do so in future. VMRO DPMNE needs to decide whether what they speak around the embassies give us power, and we will change the constitution unconditionally, should say it in front of the people. They should tell us whether they lie to the embassies or whether they lie to the people. Only then shall we continue with the discussion with them. The last question, I have a question whether you, as a prime minister, know what is going on with the government, especially the Ministry of Defense, where on not so public positions are appointed people close to people related to SDSM, and how, as a government of North Macedonia, do you think of protecting the process of NATO integration and EU integration from integration? This is an opportunity to speak of the digitalization, because in a research for partization of the processes, I had certain results that are published only in daily newspapers and probably no one reads them. So what do you think of doing to protect yourself? Because some serious reports point out to serious corruption from this government, and there is no space to excuse yourselves with what happened 10 or 12 years ago, or that VMRO DPMNE held this country captive, because it is obviously that we are now also in such captive situation. Thank you for your explanation, because I did not hear about the question. How are you going to use the digitalization to save our country from corruption? Those who know me know that I come from the sector of digitalization, and if someone worked on digitalization of the processes in the country, then that would be me. And thanks to what we've done together with my colleagues Today we have fast internet on the territory of the whole country. We have cloud services that can be used by all institutions. We have highest level of platforms for digital TV, and these are projects where I worked. And I will be very sincere. I worked in another area, renewable energy sources, and when I came to work in the public sector, I've never seen so much paper for 1 month. Using so much paper, I've never seen this. And what I consider that needs to be improved and advanced, and is being advanced, however, nothing can be developed overnight, and nothing can be transformed overnight, is digitalization of the processes, but step by step, institution by institution. And this is an obligation of all the institutions. And there is one rule that is empirically proven, that the larger level of digitalization provides reduced opportunities for corruption, no human contacts, better transparency, better availability. And in the case of your questions, all interested people who want to be part of certain process. Regarding the Ministry of Defense, we are a NATO member state, and all processes led by the minister and her team are closely coordinated with NATO in Brussels and with the member states of NATO. If you have certain case that you identified as inappropriate, then you can speak about this case with name and surname, and if you cannot, then I will report it to the appropriate institutions. So you have the Minister of Defense at your disposal, as well as all her sectors. Regarding the reports for corruption in the country, the corruption did not start today or yesterday. It did not start 1 year ago. It started a long time ago. You mentioned captive state. North Macedonia was captive state by the beginning of last year. And from captive state, in the time of ВМРО ДПМН, when representatives of opposition could not appear on TV, when it was an exception if certain representative from the opposition went on a national television. Now we have a completely different situations. The media are free in their politics and inviting guests and asking questions. Second, we had elections that were assessed by everyone, and all citizens, through publicly presented evidence, could see that the then ВМРО ДПМН had politicized the national institutions. They conducted the elections, and this is not the case now, because the last elections conducted by this government were quite democratic. The opposition they won 50 municipalities, and now they have no idea what to do with them. There were certain promotions, but there are no projects. Regarding the other reports, I read carefully the report of the State Department, and I always do this. They underline the progress in certain cases and point out the areas where the country should do better. I relate this to the head of the EU delegation, and what he said yesterday is all institutions in the country should advance their operation, but all institutions, including the Assembly, that needs to vote on the reform amendments in judiciary and rule of law without blocking them for months and for years by the opposition. Second, the judiciary bodies should improve their operation, their transparency, because they're independent from the government. They have a budget defined by the government, but they manage with it and they manage their own processes. And of course, the government, through the institutions, should advance the rule of law and fight against crime and corruption. All these institutions, when improving their operation up to the level of an individual, then you will see how the reports will show better results for North Macedonia. And there is another process, and that is the screening that is underway with the European Union. And this screening ends with a report for what was seen as weakness in the processes, in the laws, in the implementation of laws, and what should we do better to meet the criterion to become a society that is at the level of the EU member states. And that is why I say that the process of integration into the European Union is not a process on its own. It is not a process of an individual, it is not a process of a political party, it is not a process of a single government, but it is a process of the whole society. And all those who represent our society, and the society is represented in the assembly through the members of the parliament, everyone should support this process, because the process of EU integration means enhancing of everything about what you ask and what the citizens ask. Thank you. No other questions, and this would be the end of today's event. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.
Благодарам.